My name is Eleanor. I'm 72 years old, and I never thought I'd live to see the day where my only son would stand across from me in a courtroom, trying to strip me of everything I had worked for. I sat there trembling, my heart pounding so hard I thought the judge could hear it. Martin, my son, stood tall with his lawyer at his side, holding out papers for me to sign. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, so I squinted at the pages, confused, lost in all the words. I looked at him, hoping for reassurance, but all I saw was a cold smile that didn't look like the boy I once raised. He leaned in and whispered, "Just sign it, Mom. Trust me." Before my shaking hand could touch the pen, the judge raised his voice. He asked to see the documents himself. I remember holding my breath as he flipped through the pages. His brow furrowed, his lips tightened, and then he looked directly at me. "Mrs. Harper, do you understand what your son is asking you to sign?" His voice echoed through the room, slicing through the silence. I shook my head. That's when he started to read, line by line, and with every sentence my chest grew tighter. He was reading aloud words that carried the weight of betrayal I couldn't yet fully process. People shifted in their seats, whispering, gasping. My world spun. The judge stopped, looked at me again, and said, "Eleanor, this is not just paperwork." I froze, my eyes darting from the judge to Martin. My son's face hardened, his jaw locked. And in that moment, I realized I might have just discovered the darkest secret of my life. What would you do if your own child tried to trick you in front of a courtroom full of strangers? Hold on, because what happened before this day will make you question everything about family, trust, and loyalty. I grew up in a small town where life was slow and steady, and I stayed there most of my life. I married young, and my husband, William, was the love of my life until the day he passed. We built a modest home together, brick by brick, and we raised our only child, Martin, under that roof. Life was never rich, but it was honest, filled with laughter, Sunday dinners, and late-night talks on the porch. I carried those memories like jewels in my pocket. After William's passing, my days grew quieter, but I told myself it was worth it because Martin would visit, he would call, he would still need me. But the truth? He drifted further and further away as the years rolled by. That's why when the phone rang one evening and I heard his voice, warm and sweet like it used to be, my heart nearly burst. He said he missed me, that he wanted to come see me. I didn't ask questions. I didn't dig into where he had been all those years. I was just a mother, happy that her son was finally coming home. But I should have known things that feel too good to be true usually are. When he pulled into the driveway, I cried. His car was shiny, expensive, a far cry from the beat-up truck he used to drive. He hugged me, and for a moment, I believed maybe we could go back to being mother and son, the way we were before life got complicated. But even then, something in his eyes felt hurried, like his smile had an expiration date. I didn't know it yet, but his return wasn't about love. It was about something far darker. Martin started showing up often, almost too often, with arms full of groceries or little gifts. He'd sit across the table from me, grinning, asking questions about the house, the bills, my health. He kept saying things like, "Mom, you shouldn't stress about all this paperwork. Let me help you. Just trust me." His words sounded caring, but they rolled off his tongue too fast, rehearsed. He told me I was getting older, that I didn't need to carry these burdens anymore. Part of me wanted to believe him. After all, wasn't he my son? Didn't I raise him to look after me? But the nights told me another story. One evening, I woke up to get a glass of water. The hallway light was faint, but I could hear his voice. He was in the kitchen, speaking low on the phone. His words were sharp, filled with anger. "She's stubborn, but she'll sign. Don't worry, I'll make her sign. I froze, gripping the wall, my throat tight.
Who was he talking to?
Why was he so desperate for me to sign something? I went back to bed, but sleep never came. His laughter haunted me, and in that laughter, I felt danger creeping closer. The next day, Martin was all sunshine again. He took me out to dinner, bought me a scarf, told me I looked beautiful. I wanted so badly to hold on to those good moments, to believe the little boy I raised was still somewhere in there. He leaned across the table, telling me how much he loved me, how he only wanted to make life easier. Then he slid into the conversation again. You should really let me handle the paperwork, Mom. I'll make sure everything's taken care of. His voice was gentle, but his eyes, they weren't soft anymore. They looked like they belonged to a stranger. When we got home, he went to shower and I noticed his briefcase on the couch. Something inside me pushed me to look. My hands shook as I opened it, my chest pounding like a drum. Inside was a thick envelope with my name written across it. My breath caught in my throat. Why would my name be on something hidden away in his bag? I told myself not to peek, that maybe I was overthinking. But mothers know when something is wrong. I slid the papers out, and the moment I saw the words, transfer of property, my knees went weak. I stumbled back, clutching the papers like they were poison. I don't know what scared me more, that my son was hiding these papers, or that I was right about the pit in my stomach all along. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, maybe something for taxes or insurance. But the stack was thick, with page after page listing my house, my pension, even medical power of attorney. My name was everywhere, but it wasn't written with love. It was written like prey marked for capture. My hands were still holding the papers when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned slowly, and there he was, Martin, dripping water from his hair, a towel slung over his shoulders. His smile vanished when his eyes landed on the documents in my hand. He froze, his jaw tightening. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then his voice dropped low, colder than I'd ever heard it. Mom, why are you going through my things? His eyes were locked on mine, sharp as glass, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own child. The paper shook in my hands as he walked closer, his wet hair dripping onto the floor, his jaw tight. Mom, he said slowly, you shouldn't go snooping through my things. I tried to find words, but my throat was dry. I wanted to ask him why he was doing this, why he wanted me to sign away everything, but all that came out was a whisper. Martin, what is this? He yanked the papers from my hands and tossed them back into the briefcase like they were nothing. Then he leaned down, his voice low and heavy. You don't need to worry about things you don't understand. You just need to sign when I tell you to sign. His fist slammed against the table, rattling the glass vase beside me. I jumped back, my heart racing, wondering how the boy I once rocked to sleep could turn into a man that frightened me in my own home. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every shadow felt like a threat. I wanted to run, but where would I go? This was my home, the home I built with my husband, the only place that held the memories of my life. And now it felt like I was trapped inside it with a stranger who carried my son's face. I told myself, maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just stressed. But deep down, I knew something darker was at play. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I cooked breakfast, scrambled eggs the way he used to love them, hoping maybe it would soften him, remind him of who we were. He barely touched his plate. His eyes stayed glued to his phone, fingers typing fast, his face lit by the screen. I sipped my coffee and pretended not to notice, but my stomach churned. When he left the room, I reached for the phone he'd set down on the counter, but he walked back in too quickly. His eyes narrowed as he caught me pulling away. "Mom, don't touch my things," he snapped. My chest tightened at the sharpness of his voice. Later that day, my neighbor Clara knocked on my door. She was kind, always checking in, always bringing over a pie or a plate of cookies. She leaned close and whispered, "Eleanor, is everything all right? I've seen Martin around, and something doesn't feel right." I brushed it off at first, embarrassed, but she wouldn't let it go. She told me she'd heard stories about men tricking their elderly parents out of their homes, leaving them with nothing. I felt a chill crawl over my skin. Could Martin really do that to me? Clara grabbed my hand, her eyes fierce. "Please, Eleanor, be careful." That night, I sat in my room staring at the ceiling, Clara's words echoing in my head. I wanted to believe my son loved me, that I was imagining things. But when I saw the look in his eyes, the way he hovered over me with those papers, I knew Clara was right. Something terrible was coming, and I was standing in the middle of it. I tried to push back. The next day, when Martin laid another set of documents on the table, I shook my head.
No, Martin.
"I won't sign until I understand." His eyes darkened, and he leaned over me. "You don't need to understand. You just need to trust me." His voice was no longer calm. It was sharp, demanding. I told him I needed time, but he slammed his hand down, making me flinch. "Enough. You're making this harder than it has to be." My chest tightened, tears pricked my eyes. He didn't even notice. He just shoved the pen toward me, his jaw clenched. "Sign it, Mom. Now." My hands trembled as I held the pen. I thought about my husband, about the promise we made that this house would always be our safe place. I thought about the nights I stayed up rocking Martin when he was sick, how I'd given everything I had to raise him right. And now he was standing here, treating me like an obstacle instead of his mother. My fingers brushed the paper, and my heart screamed not to do it. Just then, a knock echoed from the front door. Martin's head snapped up, his face twisting in frustration. He cursed under his breath and stormed off to answer it. When he opened the door, there stood Clara, holding a folder in her hand. And behind her was a man I had never seen before. Clara stepped inside, her voice calm but firm. "Eleanor, this is my cousin Tom. He's a lawyer." My son froze, his smile fake as he greeted them. Tom set his briefcase down and asked if he could take a look at the papers Martin had been asking me to sign. My stomach flipped as Martin tried to block him, saying it was just family matters. But Clara's sharp eyes didn't budge. She reached out and touched my shoulder, giving me strength I didn't know I had. Slowly, I handed the folder to Tom. He adjusted his glasses, flipping through each page with careful eyes. Silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of paper turning. Then Tom looked up at me, his face serious. "Eleanor, if you had signed this, you would have given Martin full control over your house, your savings, even your medical decisions. You would have had nothing left." The words hit me like a train. My knees went weak, my throat closed, and I clutched the armrest of the chair to keep from falling. Martin's face turned red, his jaw tight. "This isn't any of your business," he snapped. But Clara stepped between us, her voice steady. "It is now." I thought my son might back down. Instead, his eyes turned wild, and he glared at me like I was the enemy. "So, this is how it's going to be?" he spat. "You'd rather trust a neighbor and her lawyer cousin than your own son?" His voice shook the walls. And in that moment, I realized I was staring into the face of someone I barely knew anymore. Martin's anger didn't stop there. The next morning, he stood in the doorway, blocking my path as I tried to leave for church. His face was cold, his voice sharp. "If you don't sign those papers, Mom, you'll regret it. And don't think you'll see my kids again. I'll make sure you never do." My breath caught in my throat. My grandkids, my sweet grandkids, he was using them as leverage. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I whispered, "Martin, why are you doing this to me?" He didn't answer. He just turned away, his silence louder than words. That night, I sat in the dark, holding a photo of William and praying for strength. Clara came by again, her face filled with worry. She told me I didn't have to fight this alone, that we could take Martin to court. The thought of dragging my son into a courtroom cut deep into my heart. What would people think? What would it do to my family's name? But Clara looked me straight in the eye and said, "Eleanor, this isn't just about pride. It's about survival." I knew she was right, but my hands shook at the thought. The next day, a man in a suit knocked on my door and handed me a thick envelope. My name was printed across the front in bold letters. Inside was my court summons. My stomach twisted as I realized the battle I never wanted was now unavoidable. And the person I had to fight was my own flesh and blood. His threats circled in my mind like vultures, but it wasn't until I held that court summons in my hands that reality finally crashed down on me. My son, my only son, was about to drag me into a legal battle for the very roof over my head. I sat on the edge of my bed, the paper trembling in my hands, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. Asked myself over and over, how did it come to this? I raised him, I fed him, I worked myself to the bone so he could have a better life. And now he was taking me to court, trying to steal everything I had left. Tell me, what would you do if your own child turned against you like that? When I showed Clara the summons, she squeezed my hand. "You don't have to go through this alone, Eleanor. We'll stand with you." I nodded, though fear weighed heavy on me. That night I couldn't eat. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Martin's face, not the little boy I once tucked into bed, but the hardened man who now looked at me like prey. Still, I knew one thing. I had no choice but to fight back. The date was set, and the countdown to that courtroom battle began. The day finally came. The courthouse stood tall and cold, its stone walls like something out of a nightmare. Clara walked beside me, steady as ever, while Tom carried a stack of files under his arm. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and the air felt thick as I stepped into the courtroom. When I looked across the aisle, my heart sank. Martin was already there, dressed in a sharp suit, flanked by two expensive-looking lawyers. He looked so confident, so smug, as if he'd already won. When the judge entered, everyone rose, the room falling silent. I tried to steady my breathing, to remind myself that I still had a voice, even if it shook. Martin's lawyer painted him as the dutiful son who was only trying to help his elderly mother handle her affairs. The lies rolled so smoothly off his tongue, I almost doubted myself. Almost. Then the judge turned to me and asked the question that made my chest tighten. "Mrs. Harper, did you willingly sign these documents?" My mouth went dry. All eyes turned toward me, waiting for an answer. I swallowed hard and shook my head. "No, Your Honor. I never understood what they were." My son pushed me. He told me to sign without explaining. My voice cracked, but I forced the words out. The judge frowned and asked to review the documents himself. He flipped through them slowly, his face darkening with every page. Then he began to read aloud, his deep voice carrying through the courtroom. Line after line revealed clauses that would strip me of my house, my savings, even my right to make decisions about my own health. Gasps echoed from the benches as the truth spilled out into the open. I gripped the edge of the table, my legs trembling. The words didn't even sound real. My own son had crafted a trap to leave me with nothing, to control every part of my life. The judge looked at Martin sharply. "Mr. Harper, are you aware of what you are asking your mother to sign?" Martin shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening, but he said nothing. The silence was louder than any words. In that moment, everyone in the room could see the truth for what it was. My body shook, but I found my voice. I told the court how Martin had pressured me, how he'd used anger and threats to push me toward signing. I spoke about the nights I stayed awake, scared in my own home, afraid of the very person who should have been protecting me. My voice was weak at first, but with every word, I grew stronger. I told them how I loved my son, how I had given him everything, and how much it tore me apart to be standing here against him. My words weren't rehearsed. They were raw, straight from my heart. By the time I finished, the courtroom was silent. Even the judge seemed to sit a little straighter, his eyes heavy with the weight of my words. I took a deep breath and looked at Martin. For the first time, he couldn't meet my eyes. The man who had walked in with such confidence now sat slouched, his face red with shame. Or was it anger? Either way, I knew the mask had finally cracked. The judge cleared his throat, his voice steady as he prepared to deliver his decision. The judge's ruling came down like a hammer. He declared the documents invalid and warned Martin in front of everyone that what he had attempted was nothing short of exploitation. My house, my savings, and my rights would remain mine. Relief washed over me, but it was bittersweet. I had won, yes, but at a cost no mother ever wants to pay. Martin stormed out of the courtroom, his eyes filled with rage, leaving behind the wreckage of what used to be our bond. Clara wrapped her arm around me, and for the first time in weeks, I let out a shaky breath of peace. Later that evening, we sat at my kitchen table, sipping tea, the house finally quiet. I looked around at the walls William and I had built, and for the first time, I felt safe again. But I also knew something deeper. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes, it's the people who stand by you when the rest of the world turns against you. So let me ask you, if your own child betrayed you, would you find the strength to fight back, or would you let fear take everything from you? Because in the end, kindness deserves protection, and blind trust can cost more than you're willing to lose.